the word this morning. Paul writes this, as I said, to the Ephesian church. And some good lessons in there. Let me ask you as we start, what is the best gift that you've ever gotten? Yeah.
There has not been one day since my son has been born that there was not a big, huge argument in our house about something. But one morning I woke up and my birthday comes right after his, so on his birthday I bought him a little robot that he could put together in different ways and it would do different things. But I woke up and he usually wakes up before me and I hear this little going through my room, and he had woken up really early, built his robot, put a banana and a Pop-Tart on it, and a little note in his scribbling that says, "I love you, Mom," and that was his birthday gift. He made me breakfast, a banana and a Pop-Tart. That was the best.
That was great. What else? Best gift you've ever gotten?
I had 2 healthy children in an engagement ring. Not in that order. Let's clarify that.
Oh, you're quick, because that just came to you just like that.
Well,
It occurred to you that.
big jewelry and healthy babies.
Okay, others. Well, let me share a few other gifts, things that you probably don't know about, or some of you may, but others you don't. New Jersey. Anybody from New Jersey originally? No.
I lived there for a while.
Okay. Drought-resistant wheat. The Trojan horse. The World Wide Web. Human freedom. Penicillin. Tissues. All of those, the thing they have in common is they were all gifts. Let me give you a little background. New Jersey, did you know it was a gift? 1665, the Duke of York gave to Sir George Carteret and Lord Berkeley the land called New Jersey. Sometime after that, it resorted back to the United States. But at least for a while, the entire state of New Jersey was a gift. I didn't know that. That's a gift that keeps on giving. Princeton, New York Giants, New Jersey Turnpike, Chris Christie. Some parts of that we may want to keep, some parts we may want to give back. Another one, Norman Borlaug. Anyone know the name? Norman Borlaug. He developed the first disease-resistant wheat seeds. And that in itself has changed agriculture worldwide. They've been able to replicate that into other seeds, but also allow it to produce food where food was not available, and has taken care of a lot of the world hunger problems. Trojan horse. Okay, there's a gift that you may not have wanted to get, but it was a gift. It was given. Of course, it was packed with Greek soldiers, which decimated Troy, but a gift nonetheless. Penicillin. How many of you know the story of penicillin? We rely on it, or strains of it, or future incarnations of it, to fight all sorts of bacteria and disease. Penicillin, Alexander Fleming is at least given credit for it, that he was kind of your typical absent-minded professor and tremendous researcher, but left on vacation for 2 weeks and left a lot of his mold samples out. And he came back and he discovered that one of them that had been near wheat mold, the bacteria hadn't grown. And the other ones were just kind of taking over the petri dishes. He's recounted as saying, well, that's interesting. He worked on that for 15 years and then kind of gave it to a number of other researchers and said, I can't come up with a way to replicate this in mass quantities. I know it works, but I can't do it in mass quantities. And out of that, we have penicillin. That and aspirin are recounted as being two of the greatest pharmacological breakthroughs in history. Another one, Tim Berners-Lee. Nobody knows that name. Come on, Ken. There are some who have claimed credit for his invention and others who, like he, actually did it. He is not Al Gore, but he is the inventor of the internet. And his decision was, this is something that the world needs, and therefore I will not capitalize on it and make fortunes on it. So he gave it to the world. So the next time you pick up your cell phone or the next time you get on the internet, you can thank Tim Berners-Lee for this very generous gift. Human freedom. Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King Jr., George Washington, a number of others have given us the freedoms that we enjoy. And it wasn't cheap to any of them, but it's been free for most of us. One of the ones that, probably if I had to ask you, and if I asked the question a different way, which is why I didn't ask it a different way, I would have said, what is the greatest gift of all time? Most of you could probably answer that, right? And it is? Jesus. Yeah. And that's what Paul is recognizing in here, that the greatest gift that anyone can receive is Jesus. That changes everything. And for Paul, he was saying that one of the things that had changed was this sense of alienation. Psychologists are kind of divided as to what is the greatest of all the human emotions and the greatest of needs. Some would say it's love. Some would say it's a sense of belonging. But regardless of what it is, most of them would agree that we are all working. No matter what we're doing, we're striving to not feel isolated and on the outside and alienated and alone. Would you agree? The things that we say, the things that we don't say, even things as sometimes offensive to some of us as being politically correct. Why are we politically correct? Well, because we don't want to step outside the boundaries and say things that might alienate us from others, right? Paul said Jesus came to break down the barriers of alienation. He came to take those things away that were separating us, not just from one another, but from God. If you think of the current world situation, what are some of the problems that we have? Name a few.
Terrorism.
What is it?
Terrorism.
Terrorism. Yeah, big one.
Hate.
Hate. What else? Hunger. Violence in the streets. Gangs. Drugs. Abortion. All sorts of things, right? I'll bet if we sat down with each one of those, we could probably trace its roots back to this whole sense of belonging, or lack thereof, sense of alienation, don't you think? Why are we at war? Why are we at turmoil with one another? Well, because we feel as though one has and the other one doesn't. You have something that I don't, and I want it. And so I'm feeling alienated. I don't feel like I belong to you. I don't feel like I matter. And so we do battle over that. Violence, same thing downtown. Shootings. For a 7-year period, Nancy and I lived in the murder capital of the United States. Flint, Michigan, correct. And we lived in the heart of that in Beecher. Beecher, for 3 of the 7 years that we were there, was the highest per capita murder area of anywhere in the United States. And Flint consistently was in the top 5. Needless to say, when I took my mother-in-law's daughter to Flint to serve, she was not thrilled. I don't know that I was ever her favorite, and I don't even know if I was ever suitable for her daughter in her eyes, but that certainly didn't raise that expectation any. And there was a lot of fear. Fear over us being killed, fear over us getting into situations we couldn't handle. But we very quickly discovered that really the only ones that were being shot at or being killed or involved in any of that were those who had broken relationships. Our next door neighbor was shot and killed by his wife. Why? Because she found that he was cheating on her. We lived next to an 800-unit apartment complex. Drugs, prostitution, all sorts of things in and out of there. Shootings practically on a weekly basis. Never bothered us. I mean, it never touched us that way because no one that we knew was involved in that. We weren't involved in the drug trade. It's good. I think that probably would have changed my hiring status here. We weren't involved in gang violence. We weren't involved in any of the things that were detrimental to one's health. We were, however, confronted by 2 police officers the second weekend that we lived there. We were moving our stuff out of the garage, and one of them came up to the door and peeked his head in the garage, and he said, "So you're new to the area?" Boxes gave it away, I guess. I said, "Yeah, we are." He said, "Well, I don't know how your church moves you in and out, but," he said, "I would suggest that the first opportunity that you get to move out of here, you do that." I said, "Oh, why is that?" "Well, this is no place for you." Well, when we pushed him a little more on it, part of it was that it was predominantly an African-American area. Well, not predominantly, we were the only white family within a quarter mile. And he didn't feel as though that was appropriate for us. The other is he made no bones about the fact that there was a lot of violence in the area, and one of the things that they did was they never responded to shootings until the shooting was done, and then they came and collected the bodies. Seriously. So we heeded his advice. We only stayed there 7 years. So what does all that got to do with any of this? Well, a lot of that has to do with a sense of belonging. Relationships bind us together, don't they? Imagine a world, if you can, for just a moment, that everyone feels as though everyone else treats them with dignity and respect and honor, that there's integrity and character in whatever we do, that there's not haves and have-nots, there's not them and us, it's just we. Make any difference to our community? Of course it would. Why is that? Well, suddenly the barriers come down, the things that separate us, the things that everyone tells us can't mix together. You know, there's all sorts of things that we kind of just even gently accept. Paul was saying that no longer would there be barriers between Jews and Greeks, or Jews and Gentiles. Why? Well, because Christ took down the barrier. He said, no, you can't use that as separation anymore. You can't use me as an excuse to stay away from all of them, because all of them are all of you. We could look at it with all the things that divide us now. Christ comes into the world and the barriers come down. No more black and white America. No more baby boomers and millennials. No more immigrants and native born. No more dividing walls that keep us apart. Imagine if that were really our world. Imagine the political landscape. It would be different, I assure you. Imagine the social landscape. It too would be different. That wonderful gift, that we got, the gift of the internet. Sociologist Sherry Turkle says that the internet is a wonderful thing and social media is a wonderful thing. It brings people together at the speed of light. But there's a big part that we lose in all of that, and you all know that. How many have ever sent an email to someone in a very positive tone only to get back a very terse and very angry response because they read it totally different than how you read it, or how you wrote it? Anyone? Yeah? Good, I was thinking it was just me. Why is that? Well, the internet has a whole lot of things going for it that are good. It binds us together. We can see clear to the other side of the world in a split second. It doesn't take any time at all, does it? Part of the problem with the whole thing with violence is I'm not sure that we're any more violent now than we were a decade ago, or 2 decades ago, or 10 decades ago. But we know about it a lot quicker. With the advent of CNN, with the advent of the internet, even quicker. Everyone now's got a cell camera. And so something happens in China and we're learning about it within minutes. NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, all of those, they can't get it to us as quickly as the people that are on the scene filming it. But here's what we lose. Have you ever wished that the conversation you had via email you would have had face to face? Why is that? Well, the human part of us communicates in a lot of different ways. Words are one way that we communicate. And you've all seen the sentences, they give you a sentence and then they break it down grammatically different ways, and with each different change in the grammar, it means something totally different. Well, that's the internet. But if you can add facial expressions with your message, it adds more clarity, doesn't it? My wife and I have discovered since our first grandchild that Skyping is wonderful. We can't be in Muskegon, Michigan every day like we'd like to be, but we can Skype. We can see him running around, even if he doesn't pay any attention, but we hear his little voice going, Gamma, Papa, Gamma, Papa, Gamma, Papa. Yeah, that's enough. That works. So when you add the visual, you add some facial expression, it makes a difference, doesn't it? Ever sat by somebody's bedside when they're sick? You weren't quite sure what to say. Put your hand out, you just put it on their arm, and they turn to tears. Why? They got the message, didn't they? Someone loves them, someone cares for them, someone understands. We communicate with all of these different aspects of our lives, visually, tactily, verbally, emotionally. Okay, We know that when somebody is speaking to us lovingly, it looks a whole lot different than if somebody is speaking to us with anger. Same words maybe, but a whole lot different tone. I know. You think that after 40 years of marriage, I should know, and I do, that if I asked Nancy where she'd like to go for dinner, she'd go, wherever you'd like to. And if I get in an argument with her, and she doesn't like what I say, and she goes, whatever, they don't mean the same thing, do they? No. How do I know that? Well, I can tell from her inflection. I can tell from her emotions. I can tell from her face. I can tell from her raised hand. We need those barriers to come down. One of the greatest prayers of all times is not the one we pray every Sunday morning. We call it the Lord's Prayer, but really the Lord's Prayer was much more significant. He prayed for his disciples. And one of the things he prayed for his disciples is that they might live in unity and peace with one another. I think he knew that our inclination is that when we are fearful or uncertain or in the dark about something, our more natural response is we pull back, we isolate, we become alienated, and that only exacerbates the problem, doesn't it? Paul to the Ephesians says Christ broke down the barriers. Now compare that to what you're hearing in the news about other religions. ISIS? Really? Is there a breaking down of the barriers? Is there removal of isolation? You have something unique. The faith that you hold is different than anywhere else on earth. It's different than any place and anything and anyone that you can come in contact with. Why? Because, as Paul says, Jesus has been built into the cornerstone of the house in which we live. And the house in which we live has now become the temple of God. And the temple of God is for all people. So think of yourself, you are a brick in the temple of God, which is a housing for all the people of earth. Your role as a priesthood of all believers, your role as a disciple of Jesus or a student of Jesus is to be one who brings everyone else into the presence of God. Now, sometimes Christians get accused of being pacifist. We aren't. We're terribly activist. We don't sit on our hands. We don't watch the world go by. Our role, if we're doing it correctly, is to make sure that we're at the forefront, that we are out at the head of the charge, at the front of the battle, and that we're there to proclaim the good news. A while back, you heard in the news the couple down in south end of town that was killed when their house blew up. Still going through the trial. And I had somebody say to me, isn't it too bad that they were the ones who died? It should have been the people who didn't. My response probably shocked them. I said, well, I also know a little bit about the people who died. They were both believers. They were both very active in their churches. They both knew Christ. No, I think it was probably better that they died instead of the other ones, because they know where they're going. They know who their salvation is. They know who they belong to. They know their future, and the ones who did this don't. So let's let God give them a little more time to find their way. When we ask every Sunday morning, where has God surprised you? Where has God used you? Hopefully you're not always surprised. But I do want you to see where you're being used by God. You are a very powerful tool in the hands of God. We live in uncertain times. As I looked up some of these gifts, particularly the one in New Jersey, and realized that it had reverted back to the royal family that gave it, and then to the United States. We know that most gifts that we receive can be taken away. Okay, folks, here's one that can't. Nobody can take this one away. You can give it away. You can give it up. But it can't be taken. Once it is yours forever. So hold fast to that. What are your thoughts? What are you hearing out of this passage? Anything you want to share? Anything that strikes any of you? Yeah, Amanda.
It seems a little bit, I'm on track with you and I agree with you. It seems a little bit overwhelming too, because we live in an age that is so, the pastor where my husband and I attended in Chicago, talked about how people have become so atomized, they're just like bouncing off of each other. You know, that we don't even have the nuclear family really integrated anymore. And so if you're an atom out there, now I'm talking about the western suburbs of Chicago, it's very fast, very quick. How do you, if you're just this atom bouncing around, that you're going to run into a lot of people. I remember when I heard this on Christian radio a long time ago. My parents' generation, which would have been 40s, 50s, 60s, had about 25 people in their life that they were pretty much committed to, and these are statistics, committed to. And now the kids in this generation are going to know about 20,000 people, and they're going to know them mainly by first name. So when you go places now, I've experienced this, at least in the city, you don't even give your last name, you just your first name, and that's it. So I'm just feeling a little bit, how do you do this?
There was a cute commercial that was out a while back. I don't know whether it was Toyota or Hyundai or one of the car companies that kind of spoke to that. If you remember the commercial, the young girl, it starts with the daughter, and she's on Facebook or something, and she goes, I have 2,000 friends on Facebook. And she says, and I'm trying to get my parents on there. They have 6. And she's going through and she's looking at her cat videos and she's looking at all of these different things. And where are the parents at? Well, they're out biking with friends in the mountains, and they're out camping, and they're out, doing all of these other things face to face. And I think that's part of it. Somebody once told me there are 2 ways that you can overwhelm people. One is give them absolutely no information. Okay, don't give people information, and they will become very frustrated, and they're on the outside. The other way, give them too much information. Okay, lawyers, right? Sometimes the strategy isn't to withhold information. Sometimes the strategy is to send over 3 beacon van lines full of information and let them sort through it. We live in that one. We live in the society that with so much information, we have no information. With the advent of the internet, we now have instantaneous information, and it's amazing how many people think that everything on the internet is true. I mean, we say that jokingly, but people actually believe that.
It's not.
Bob, you're not even on the internet. I think, Amanda, the way that you get around that, the way that you solve that is you build the relationships one at a time. Still, most people have a dozen close friends. I laugh when I hear colleagues who are in large churches say, I know all these people, I've got all these people in my church. How many of you know very intimately? have all these people in my church. I know. But within a large church, there are small churches. There are groups of 12 to 15 people. And where we used to make the mistake, particularly in the 70s and 80s, is we said, hey, that's not any good. We got to break down these cliques. We got to make sure that these people don't just hang out with the same people every week. We got to get them to mix with everybody. Really? 2,000 people? 3,000 people? You're going to get them to mix? No, it's the 12, it's the 15 people. And you know, I could ask you, who are the 12 people in your life right now that you see all of the time, that you know things about, that trust you, that ask you for things, that you offer things to? And you could tell me. And then I could say, okay, how many people do you have on your Facebook list? Okay, Nancy gets a kick at mine. I don't go on Facebook all that much, but I've got a lot of people that I know, and so it's a one way that I can kind of keep tabs if I want to with where people are, and I've got like 1,000 people on Facebook. Now granted, I've got one friend that's on there 6 times, because he had 6 different Facebook accounts, but there again, you know, there's a difference between knowing names and knowing people. And Jesus was advocating for knowing people. Think of the woman who was being accused of adultery, threatened to be stoned. Everybody there knew her name. But Jesus was the only one in the group that knew her. And he changed everything. My goal in life and hush to all you people who go to dinners with me. One of my goals in life is when I go to a restaurant, I want to get to know who the server is. Why? Well, because these are the nameless, faceless people that serve us, that wait on us, that take care of us, and we ignore them. And so I try to find out who their name, I find what their name is, I find out who they are, I find out a little bit about their family, I try to get to know them, and if I go there on any kind of a basis, I try to carry on a conversation with them and remember what they told me. It's amazing the difference. You know, if you ever want more stories, ask Nancy, she'll tell you. It frustrates her. Only because every waitress in every restaurant that we go to knows who I am. So, and it takes us forever to get out. I guess that's how you get to know people. You still focus on those that you know, and you always try to leave room for others to come into that circle.
So you're talking about, yeah, it's a circle, and you're talking about levels of knowing.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right. And actually, when you want to get to know people, you're out here on the edge of that circle.
Always.
Right.
And that's the scary place. And that's the place most of us don't want to be, is out on the edge of that circle.
Because there's the anxiety there.
Yeah, there's the unknown. What if I put myself out there? What if I say, hey, Lisa, love to get to know you? And she goes, no. And she walks away. And I'm standing there going, huh? You know? My response is, okay, then I'll get to know the person next to her. Unfortunately, Lisa and I have gotten to know each other over the last year. But, you know, you have to put yourself out there. You have to, as you said, live on that edge of the circle if you're ever going to widen the circle. And most of us are afraid to do that. Most of us don't want to take that kind of uncertainty. But here's the reassurance. Jesus said, I've already broken it down. The things that separated you before, they're not there anymore. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't people still fighting that battle to keep the walls up. But Jesus said they're already gone. I already took them down. They're living in an illusionary world. So if you know that, you can go in with that information, armed with that information, and say, yeah, you know, I know you're fighting this. I know you're arguing. I know you think there's no chance in the world you could ever belong. You already do. Sorry. Eventually you wear them down with a goodness.
So it's a missionary work out there.
Yeah. Every one of these is missionaries. Y'all are missionaries. To wherever you're working, wherever you're living, wherever you're employed, even in the midst of this group. All right, let's pray. Father, thank you for breaking down the barriers and bringing us to peace. May we trust in you, even be able to live out on the edge of the circle. For we know that the edge of the circle isn't the end, it's just the beginning. And if we know and love you, then we can know and love others. Your cross has proved that to us. That vertical dimension of the cross broke the barrier between you and us. And that horizontal barrier between us and others is gone as well. Because you were nailed to both of them. Lord, may we break down those barriers as well. Amen. All right, let's receive our morning offering while we're singing. May the peace